Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome to our question and answer session for the Aikido at the Leading Edge Masterclass. Very happy to be here today with Dominique Cassidy Sensei, who just led a wonderful session on the inner path of Aikido. And Dominique, you have about 5 questions came in today, something like that.
6 even.
6. Okay, 6 even. All right, and then if Carl has a question at some point, he can also jump in. So I'll start by I'll read you the first question. Actually, the first question comes from a therapist, so it's kind of also in your line of work, I guess you could say. The first question was from Perce from Los Angeles, California. Elle says, "How might you suggest psychologically or energetically blending with others outside of the dojo?"
I would have Nada, especially that I know that she's a therapist. I would have really loved to talk to her to very narrow to the question that she would like to answer, blending around what in context of conflict. What does she mean by energetic versus psychological? I would have loved to be able to make sure I answer precisely what she would want, but if I was going to take the line of speaking of how do we blend with basically anything that happens, whether it's in relationship or in day-to-day life. So basically, how do we practice Aikido outside of the mat? And how do we work from using the mind on a psychological aspect and working also energetically? Okay, we would need probably a full week to explore that. It's a huge topic, but in terms of if we're interested in experiencing and expressing a movement of harmony within our day-to-day life, on a psychological level, what I point to is to start to know ourselves a bit better. When I meet with any challenge, whether it's a conflict, whether it's something unexpected, whether it's something I'm not happy with, whatever, when I meet with something, what is my usual psychologically based tendency? We all have ways that we respond to challenge. It could be with aggression, could be with a sense of withdrawal, could be with a sense of resignation. We all have patterns, habitual tendencies in our minds to relate to the world. And the first step, I would say, would be to get to know what are my usual habits and what is then limiting actually my ability to be in harmony with what's happening. So to look into how does the mind respond to challenge, and what type of emotion are coming with that, as a way to become accustomed to recognizing them, which is the first step to then being able to transform them. We don't really have the time to go into that now. So that would be the entry point on the psychological level. So I don't know if that would answer. Probably quite poorly. If she's a therapist, she probably might have a much in-depth type of questioning, but I just don't know where she would want to go. So.
No, I mean, it's good. So basically what you're saying is, know ourselves first, know what our challenges are, our, I don't know, fixations or our patterns, our habits.
Yeah.
Will take us a long way in how we
Yes.
energetically blend, I think she said, or blend psychologically or energetically.
Well, what limits us in blending energetically is our psychological patterns, limiting us to be free.
Right.
So something happens, and when we're free of our minds, then we blend naturally. This is what Aikido is about. It's this naturally occurring harmonious movement. So what's limiting it is our psychological ego.
Right.
And so the first step would be to start to recognize, what is limiting that flow of harmony, and basically how does it express itself in the mind, and how does it express itself in my emotional state. And that's the beginning step that allows us to then start taking more distance with it, questioning with a sense of curiosity and love, and that in and of itself allow there for a transformation or for a bypass.
Great. Well, Elle has just joined. Hi, Elle. How you doing?
Hi. Oh, God, it was you.
Yeah. Now this was This is great. This was a question that Ellie asked actually several weeks ago, and I had it saved in case. Ellie, I'm going to repeat the question that you asked, and then maybe, and Dominique just answered it, but then you guys can, because Dominique actually had a question for you. Your question was, how might you suggest psychologically or energetically blending with others outside the dojo?
I asked that question?
You did, and I think it was to Wendy
Okay.
Palmer, so that was already some time ago. Okay. Yeah, and then Dominique was asking for something that's a little bit more specific.
Well, especially since I know you're a therapist, I think there might be something much more precise. But basically, should I just summarize the answer I just gave, and we'll see if that's useful and if that's in the line that you were questioning. But basically, I was saying if we're interested in living a life as an expression of Aikido, that is a life that is an expression of a harmonious relationship with ourselves and with everything that's occurring. So what's limiting that is our habitual tendencies of the mind, the ego, the tendency, the patterns of the mind that contract us, that limits us. Because when we're free of that, then there's something quite inherent that occurs. There is a natural free movement, and that's what we call harmony. So we don't need to do anything for that, it just occurs. But what limits us is we all have usual ways that we respond to challenge, whether it's inner challenge, whether it's something from in a relationship or whatever the challenge, or the stress. So we all have habitual patterns of the mind, construct that we have, stories that we create in our mind and in our emotional state. So the first step, I would say, would be to start to know oneself. What are the ways that my psychological mind gets activated when there's a challenge, so that I can recognize it, which is a first step to become more free from it. So to have this beautiful, loving curiosity. Oh, there's a challenge occurring, and oh, what was the response? Well, there was a thought about resentment, or a thought about not being able to do it, or a thought about whatever the content might be, and to start to become acquainted with those natural tendencies, and just that, to be able then to witness them, to recognize them, and that's a first beautiful step to then starting to transform them.
I love it. That's what we teach as psychotherapists, right? Awareness and
yeah.
And so once you have some level of awareness, right? You're in the outside world. You have an awareness of your potential triggers, but you're not necessarily triggered, but you're not necessarily completely open-hearted to the world, right? What are some of the practices, as you're off the mat?
Yeah. So that's why I am happy to see you, because I assume that if you're a therapist, that my answer would be too basic. That would be kind of the first step. So yeah, you're right. It's a beautiful, important step to become more aware, but it's definitely not enough in and of itself. Then there's the whole question about transformation of the pattern. So a cultivation of different aspects of our being. For example, cultivation of compassion for the experience that we're having, or being able to see the impersonality of what is occurring. So it's not just seeing that it's there, but recognizing that this pattern that has such an impact in my life, that I do believe is me, this pattern is actually not who I am. It's a universal expression of the mind, and thousands of people experience the same. So it's not my pattern, it's a pattern. And so it's a deeper level of freedom, because then the pattern really is just seen as something quite mechanical. And then the step after that, it's the cultivation of compassion, because I know how this pattern makes me suffer. And so I can also know how much this pattern creates suffering for all the people going through it. So from there, it can generate this sense of very broad compassion for all the people, including this one, going through the pain of that pattern. And when awareness is infused with a sense of compassion, it starts to really deeply transform the experience. And so then the pattern come, and it's not just witnessed, it's actually recognized with love, a way to connect us to deeper love. It's a way to remind us of the path of compassion. And so, so what happens is the pattern gets created, and the only thing that arises out of it is just a deeper sense of connection to the human suffering and a sense of compassion. So the pattern itself creates something quite beautiful. And this is what's described in Buddhism to transform poisons into Buddhas. So first awareness, then understanding of the impersonality of it, a realization that it's an expression of human suffering, and from there, a generating of compassion, which then transforms our relationship to the pattern and ourselves.
So that's beautiful, and yes. And so as it relates to generating bodhicitta, generating compassion, right? Mm-hmm. What's the actual practice for you? Is it a cognitive practice? Oh, I'm feeling compassion. You're thinking about all the suffering in the world, connecting with that on an energetic level. Is there something sort of energetically, physiologically, feeling into your body? Is there some way beyond the thought of, yes, I'm generating compassion for all beings?
Well, the thought is definitely not enough if it's not backed up by, I mean, my main doorway for me is meditative practices in which there is, you know, like in metta meditation or Tonglen in Tibetan Buddhism, those practices in which we activate compassion. But then there's beautiful practices, slightly different, in which if we're used to meditation, is to sit in meditation and in a state of peace, and to activate the painful pattern in my system, mm-hmm. and to generate it quite intensely, and then infuse it with a sense of love, and to realize that its essence is peace.
So when you're infusing, so these are all practices I do. I've okay. been, you know, Buddhism for many, many years, and taken refuge vows. So I'm not asking so much for me necessarily. I'm really asking about a very subtle piece that, you know, mindfulness meditation has swept this country, right? And basically people are watching their thoughts go by. That's great. You know, there are a lot of people who are contemplating their navels, but they miss the whole piece of generating bodhicitta, right? Yeah. And so people don't do that, and they don't know how, and just putting it through your mind isn't enough. No. And you can't teach someone to do Tonglen. You know, it's such a deep practice.
No, but you can teach fairly easily metta. I teach that quite a bit actually, and I use it in therapy. Okay. I teach burnout prevention program based on altruism, and I teach it to people that have never meditated before. So Tonglen is a bit more complex. So I go with metta because I find it actually quite accessible.
So you're setting the intention with the meditation, right? Yeah. Metta, but then energetically, how do you convey what's happening without words, without using a cognitive process with people?
So that's the taste that I start. I'm not sure I'm going to answer precisely to what we're saying, but when people start to have in their meditative practice the sense that they can actually play around with their suffering, that they can use love in it, that they can, I go through visualization where I have, you know, people place their pain someplace and transform it. You can be very creative actually with that. So once they start to have an experiential taste that the suffering that they're going through is not personal and it's an expression of something much bigger than them, that gets us into our core. But it's not for everybody. It's not so easy to. It takes a while.
Yes. Yes.
What doesn't take a while is to teach metta. I find that it's quite quick. And if people just commit to tell metta, I really explain to them, you know, all the studies showing the impact of such practices on the brain. Mm-hmm. That actually it does have a change, that it does change something physiologically. And there's just, once we start to spend a lot of time every day, loving the others, loving ourselves, loving the other, I mean, there is something that is becoming progressively changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's an experiential way, progressive experiential way to get in touch with something beyond suffering. And
I love that. I also love that what you said about feeling into the suffering, and that there's that love is also in part of the suffering.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point that most people, it's paradoxical.
Yeah.
But I really love that. I think that's a way to reach that level of, it's not just suffering. It's not just that. It's all mixed up, and we're all vulnerable, and we're all in the same boat, and a nuke can drop on all of us at any moment. This is not just my pain or your pain. So thank you.
And basically it's teaching, it's really teaching to have the same relationship we have with suffering as with any other uke.
I love it.
Suffering is just a different uke. It's an inner uke. And so we don't want to destroy uke. We don't want to beat up uke. We don't want to even get rid of uke, because uke is energy.
Yeah.
And when we start to be able to blend with uke, then we evolve. And that's the same with our suffering. When I meet someone and they're in pain, I'm never in pain for them. I can feel their pain. I can feel how challenging, but I deeply know that pain is the possibility, psychological pain is a possibility for growth. Mm-hmm. And so when people go through a major crisis, that's how I see them. Like, you have a huge uke right now, and you can learn to blend with this uke, and it's going to be amazing when you will. But now uke is just pounding on you. It's painful. But let's go together. Let's see how uke can transform you.
I love it.
Same thing. Aikido therapy is the same movement, really.
Right. Are you a therapist?
I'm a psychiatrist. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for asking that, Miles.
We could talk for hours. Huh?
Yes, I'm sure we could.
No, I'm loving listening to this, guys. It's awesome. I
write to the association that I run here. That reaches like 5,000 MFTs in our area, and about the problem with mindfulness meditation, because it's been stripped of that bodhicitta piece. And as long as we're just contemplating our own suffering and that's it, in a way, I think it feeds narcissism.
It can, definitely. Or becoming like a robot,
Yeah.
I'm in the present. Yeah. No, definitely. It's an essential first step in many spiritual traditions, but definitely it's a beautiful tool. Mindfulness is just a beautiful tool. Very essential, but only a tool and a beginning. I think we would meet really well.
Yeah.
Great, guys. Well, Ellie, I'm glad that I saved your question from several weeks ago, and it actually seemed, because I knew you guys are in the same field, so it actually felt quite appropriate to lead off, and I'm really happy you jumped in. I didn't know if you were...
Perfect timing.
All right. Okay, the next question that we have, it's actually from Moris, and Moris is on the call. Moris, I sent you the question. Let me open your mic. I guess you're on your phone. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, I'm on my phone.
Can you see the question to ask it?
Yeah, I think I can read it. Just a sec.
Okay.
Here. I can read it now.
Moris is calling it from Izmir, Turkey.
Yes. Hi. So my question is, in the second meditation from your masterclass session, we were just sitting there with no expectation, and whatever experience there was, all was just okay, and we didn't need anything else. Staying there for a little while, I started to have this experience as if you're in a stopped car, and suddenly you sense that the car has slowly started to move. So you immediately step on the brake. When I was sitting there with no expectation and all is okay, I experienced a sense that I don't control my body anymore. It's like an outside thing that started to take control of my body. And in 1 second, my mind panics and takes control. Later, even if I try to stay there, I get bombarded by hindrances that take me back to my normal mind. So should I try to work on this, try to let go and stay in that mind, let's say? I don't know if it's clear. my question, or should I?
Is it an experience you oftentimes have?
No. Well, sometimes when I think of it now in meditation, I may have had those moments. And even before your session, during my meditation, like daily meditation, I've started to think about it. Like, I'm always trying to do something, expect something, you know, always desire something. Why isn't everything perfect? And I just tell to myself, just let go, just be, whatever there is right now, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anything else.
Okay.
And I had started to say these things, but now when you did this guided meditation last time, and that was actually right on that point. And with your guided meditation, I started to feel like, oh, it's like something is sliding away from me, you know, and I have to take control of it. And then I assume that I shouldn't take control of it, just let go as much as possible, I think. So
I would say it's not that you don't have to take control, it's that you have never been in control. So, for example, you say, I'm not in control of my body, but have you ever been in control of your body?
Not really, yeah.
Are you dividing your cells right now? Are you growing your hair? Are you doing anything that you can see? Are you doing anything so that your heart beats?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually we have all this very strong belief and need to feel in control, and it's very much reinforced by our culture. I don't know how it is in your country. In my country, we have insurances for everything, where it's the land of control.
Yeah.
We grow with that belief that actually we are in control of our life, in control of life. But actually, it's a very small amount of participation that we have. We do have a participation, but just in terms of the body, you have a participation in the movement that you're doing. But actually, even that, you know, how do you do? I mean, I have no idea how I move my hand. I'm just really happy it does. And I think it's quite amazing that it does. But the amount of information and things that are happening for the hand to move is if I had to do it, it would be overwhelming. It's millions of information. So there is something that moves and lives in the body, right? The life. And it's not something that I control, but it's something that makes us live. So when you start to have taste of that in meditation, that is what you're describing. Oh, I was in charge, I'm in charge. And then we let go. And then we're like, oh, actually, when I let go, it's still happening. When I let go, it works perfectly. So if I'm not doing it, what's doing it?
Yeah.
And it's a very, very good question. Now, of course, the I that usually thinks it's doing it is going to start freak out. And it's okay that it does. And it freaks out just at the beginning, because if you remain in that taste, then you realize it's always been like that. It's always been like that. There's always been this incredible movement that we call life, that you've been part of, that you're benefiting from, that you're allowed to rejoice in. And it's just, it's incredibly mysterious. And you're not controlling that. And it's been fine. So now when we then start to trust that, actually we've always trusted it, because otherwise your heart would not beat. We live in trust. But when we start to actively let go of the controller that needs to know, that needs to grab, that needs to become, that needs to get, you know, it's a lot of work to be a controller. So when that starts to relax, then this inherent mystery and perfect movement becomes just more apparent. And to take the example of in Aikido, when we really start to let go of control, then a flow of Aiki can start to arise. Because it doesn't happen in control. It happens when there is a freedom around it. So in meditation, don't worry about the mind panicking. It's just, it's not used to that taste of itself. Just tell the mind it's okay. It's just, we're just experiencing letting go of control. And don't do, and continue do nothing with it. Just remain. And it's okay. I mean, the body's not going to collapse. You're nothing wrong is going to happen. You just remain in presence, and you'll slowly get more used to the beautiful state of lack of control, loss of control.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I don't know if it's a life event that works to you.
Yeah. Actually, in meditation, something similar happens in the way that, for example, I'm sitting in an uncomfortable spine, and first I know that if I correct my spine, I'll be more comfortable. So I, like, on purpose correct my spine and everything, but it doesn't, last that long. Then some other time I'm just meditating and I just say, okay, I accept everything as it is. I'm just going to let go. And after a few breaths, I find myself automatically in that corrected posture. So my body puts itself in there.
Perfect.
But so far my mind comes back and says, I know better than that, I'm going to fix it even better, So
it's a beautiful example. There's an intelligence that just moves in harmony within itself, and you can tap in it and allow it to be there and rest in it. Actually, we start to spend much less energy on the mat when we stop controlling.
And I guess you can then you can use this trust in it in your daily life as well, I suppose.
It's not like you use trust. It's like you start to abide in it and to rejoice with it. Of course, when we welcome life with a sense of trust, then there's a natural flow which is completely different than the one of control. Because really, control doesn't work so well. Life is always different than what we want or expect or attempt. I mean, of course, some of the things happen in the way we're hoping for, but there's so much unexpected in life.
Yeah,
a lot of energy to control the flow of a river, instead of just flowing down the river.
Yeah.
And enjoy floating.
Okay, thanks, Dominique.
Thank you for your question. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you too.
Great, Moris. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next questions, we've actually got a few questions from Amber, but before we go to Amber, which is she sent in, since Carl's live, I thought I would check in with Carl. Carl, did you have a question or comment that you want to add here?
I always have questions. Well, that's my job. I was thinking about what you said about trust last time, and that got me to thinking about faith. And then I've noticed that if people are honest and not prejudicial, they can train together, even if they have no faith or different faiths, or Christians and Buddhists and etc. So I looked up then what Sensei had to say about that, and the one I came up with was that Aikido is not a religion. I think the quote was, "My true Buddha enlightens all religions and brings them to completion."
Beautiful.
What does that mean? That's my question.
So the way I'm reading that, and what touches me when I hear that, is that every religion is an expression of the truth, just like every word is a modulation of silence. So, but there is a deeper truth in which there is no separation between things. There's a deeper truth in which there is no opposite, no difference, no boundaries, where there's not two, basically. And that's what's called awakening or enlightenment in many traditions, or that's state of unions described in actually a lot of religion as well. So there is an understanding of reality in which, because it's a united way of looking at reality, everything can be seen from that perspective as an expression of reality without conflict and without one denying another. So if we go very deep in a non-dual taste of who we are, if we take the example of the ocean and the waves, so there's all those beautiful waves, and when we go down into the ocean and realize, oh, I'm the ocean, there's only one thing that is an expression then of all those beautiful waves, then we can really rejoice and connect with all those waves equally, with the same curiosity and the same involvement. And they're not in any way competing with each other. They're just the same expression of the same ocean, which is actually what we essentially are. So there is a type of awakening, a non-dual awakening, and this is what I hear when I hear your quote, in which then every religion or every truth or every philosophy can be met and experienced at a very core level as one thing. It's realizing the unity in diversity. So that's how I would speak about it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's beautiful too.
Then we have to take it on the mat somehow. And that's the challenge. Thank you.
It's the same thing. On the mat, there can be two waves or one ocean. Really, there's no difference between talking right now or exploring it on the mat. We always go from two waves to meet as one ocean.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carl.
But thank you. Beautiful quote that you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yay.
Okay. All right, great. So we're going to go to Amber's questions now. I see Alex Zaltzman has just joined. Hi, Alex. How you doing? Now, Dominique, Amber has 4 questions. I don't think that we'll see. I mean, I don't know that we'll get to all 4 of her questions in time, but also since Alex has joined up live, Alex, if you have a live question that you wanted to ask about ask Dominique, then maybe after the next 1 or 2 questions, you can just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Okay, so I'll just read these in order if it's okay with you, Dominique. The first question from Amber Adams from Los Angeles, also from Los Angeles, California. Amber says, what are some practices, and it's great because in your answer to Carl, you had mentioned about going beyond boundaries or dropping boundaries. So the question is related to that. What are some practices that start to dissolve the physical boundaries around our identities with our bodies?
I mean, there's many practices for that, but the ones that personally has been the most powerful for me is working with meditation.
Just, Dominique, before you answer the question, could you say something about why we would want to do that in the first place, or
okay,
when it's appropriate, or?
Yes, so yeah, it's a beautiful question because actually it's not that many. I mean, I don't know that many people that actually. It means there's already a certain spiritual maturity there. Because what happens if we take back the example of the wave and the ocean? So we start as the wave with this separate unit that has a limited life and that is experiencing suffering, and that unit, that vehicle, wants to wake up. So the usual first doorway that we look at is the doorway of the mind. We start to look at the suffering at the level of the mind, the type of thoughts that we have, the beliefs that we have, and we spend a lot of time there questioning our assertion about life and ourselves, and then starting to modulate them. And in meditation, we spend a lot of time becoming freer and freer from our thoughts, to not be believing them, to not be engaged with them, and to allow the silence that actually is permeating through them to become more and more apparent. And that can take us years of beautiful practice, but it's usually a very important aspect of the spiritual path, is that there's a belief of separation in the mind, and we have to dissolve that. And it's a beautiful level of awakening when it happens. But then what remains, and it's a trickier level of practice, is that there's still an identity that has been created at the level of the body. When a child is born, it has no sense of inside and outside. It's just floating in itself. Actually, it's a sense of complete union. And the child progressively has to learn what that's. There's a difference between this and the pillow. And progressively it creates a physical identity. And it's extremely essential for us to do that in a way which is coherent. But then when we want to transcend it and awaken from it, then this identity in the body remains. And we see it because even though we can be very free at the level of the mind, we're still taken by our emotions. So we see that there's no point at getting angry, and that there's actually not even an identity becoming angry. That's if we're interested in the absence of self teachings. Or we can see the thoughts about being angry and not getting involved with them, many different ways, but there's still a gut energetic contraction at the level of the body, which goes with anger. And that oftentimes is much harder to deal with. And it really starts to dissolve when the identity at the level of the body starts to become more fluid. So that would be for me the reason to get involved in those practices, to end the process of this dissolution of the wave into the ocean. Actually, it's a wrong term, because we don't need, the wave needs to do nothing to realize it's the ocean. Actually, it's the limitations of the word. But nonetheless, the wave has such a habit of being like, I'm this wave and you're that wave, and I'm taller than you and you're faster than me. And so to start to relax that allows the wave to start looking somewhere else. And,
especially in conflict.
In any time, but yeah, definitely in conflict.
Yeah, like I mean, if we think of Aikido, because it's really, you know, the whole idea of entering into a conflict can actually set those boundaries much stronger if we bring a competitive mind to it.
Yeah. So any sense of limitation, if there is a limitation between me and you, then I'm going to have to protect myself, and that means I'm going to have to reinforce a separation with you. So there's a level of the mind where I can become free of that, but then at the level of the body. So this dissolution of the body can definitely happen on the mat while training, and doing freestyle jiwaza is just a beautiful way to do it if we're able to let go of control and able to completely let go of any intent of the way it's going to look or what I'm going to do. Or basically, we have to, when the ego dies at the level of the mind in a jiwaza, then it allows for the body to progressively dissolve. And we probably all have had that taste in a jiwaza, where in those moments of absolute perfection, where something just occurs and it's pure harmony. At that moment, there's no sense of a limited, separated body, but that it just happens. And it can be recognized and it can be invited more and more. But then in meditation, we can consciously work at those set boundaries of the body, and really through different type of visualization. We don't have time to, I mean, it would be beautiful too, but there's beautiful visualization that we can do to actually take sensations of the body and let them dissolve and dissolve and dissolve and dissolve. And at the end, there's just no body there. So meditation is a beautiful doorway to do that. And they can be, basically, if we're going to just give him two different ways to do it. One would be, if we go if we take one sensation and if we go very, very deeply in that sensation, starting to look for its boundary. You know, we have the belief and the experience that, you know, if I look at my finger, then there is definitely my finger and then outside the finger, and it's limited. But if we, in a meditative state, start to take one, for example, if we take the hand, and if we were going to want to draw very, very precisely the limit, where does the hand end? And if we start very precisely, very intently to look, where does the sensation end? And then what happens experientially is that it doesn't end. It's not like there is feeling, kunk, and it ends. So when we do that, the idea of a very limited hand with a beginning and end, which is what we see, what we know, what we have trained ourselves to feel, that starts to be experienced as just a floating energy that has no beginning and no ending. And we can do that with the whole body progressively. So we go really every part of the body, and we just go into the sensation and see it's limitless. Go into the sensation, see it's limitless, and it dissolves the boundaries of the body. So now this is a beautiful practice to do if we to do a kind of on a regular basis in the meditation, and then it happens more and more. Then we can just switch. Poof. It's like wave, ocean, wave, ocean. We can switch our perspective. So wave, well, it's this body, and I'm gonna, comb my hair and brush my teeth and feed and put a sweater, and this is wave. And then there is ocean. What I am is way beyond that, includes that, expresses that, but is no way limited by that. And I could talk for hours about that, but I think it's a good start. So go into the sensation of every part of the body and look for a limit for it. And when you don't find it, go into the next part of the body, and that will dissolve all the sensations into emptiness or peace.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, and you mentioned in the Aikido practice, like in a moment of grace in Jiwaza, for example, and I know there's many other practices, but I think it's also important to point out that, when we're practicing technique, we're taking something from the past, we're repeating it for a desired outcome in the future. And that's what you were saying, that like in a Jiwaza, you have to let go of control, you have to let go of a desired outcome. So in a way, it's okay to practice technique, but you have to be aware that if you're primarily doing the practice of technique, it's going to actually increase the separation. It's going to strengthen the boundary between self and other in a way.
Yeah, then it's the eternal. Yeah, it's true. I think it would be much more challenging to do that in a technique, unless we reach a level, like a very, very high level where the technique is not even an issue anymore. It flows so natural.
Right. Yeah.
And then we can start to drop, but it takes a while. We have to become disinterested on how it looks.
Yes. Yeah.
And that takes a while to be completely free there, and that the technique still occurs.
Yeah.
So I would say that I would say it's still possible, but it would be far down the road. And usually, you're right, we just get distracted. Oh, a little bit more this, a little bit more that, which is beautiful. But then we're busy with our mind doing something.
Well, also we have a large part of the Aikido world is not just distracted, but that's the curriculum.
Yeah.
A little bit more that, a little bit more this, another Ikkyo. You get to another year of doing Ikkyo, and you'll get this and you'll get that. And okay, externally and super. There's a truth to that, but it's all in the relative world. It's not about this place where the boundaries dissolve that you're talking about.
But definitely, if he's asking the question, because yes, when we're starting to wanting to dissolve the identity at the level of the mind or the body, then we're definitely interested in discovering the ocean.
Right.
And discovering the ocean has nothing to do with perfecting the wave.
Nothing. Yeah.
The wave is perfect the way it is now. It doesn't need to have one more range of part or no better variation of kokyunage. It's just fine.
Well said. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So, okay, we're going to go into, unless Alex has a question, we'll go into the next question. Alex says has a question. Okay, so Alex Zaltzman, Alex from Tel Aviv, but he's living in Uster with Peter and Julia now.
Yes. Oh, great. Oh, that's lovely.
Hi. Yeah.
So, your mic's open.
Yeah, thank you, Miles, and hi everyone. So I just, as you were talking about doing Jiwaza on the mat, which is kind of on the physical level, we're doing it on the physical level. But there's another practice which it's just a comment. It's not. I don't know if it's really a question. It's basically there's something called enlightened dialogue, or which can happen in the we space, and if and for example, to get there, sometimes you have to do this be engaged enough in meditative practice to develop a kind of a presence, very high presence quality. And when this quality kind of people who have this quality meet in this we space, there's something very amazing can occur in between those people. So it just reminded me of the Jiwaza, like in the dialogue, for example, this kind of dialogue you have. We're doing it by words. We're talking, and then basically the words point to something, and that something starts to emerge between people. And when we're doing a Jiwaza on the mat, it's basically the same thing, but there's just a different set of rules, which is those techniques that we practice them, and then something amazing starts to occur as well. It's like a magic, basically. So, but you don't know where it comes from. It just appears from somewhere, and yeah. So that's a kind of a parallel that I can see in Aikido and in this kind of we space that actually it's a different type of practice, but it's also something that I'm familiar
It's a
with.
different doorway, but it's really the same practice. It's just that there is many different ways to explore it. But you sound so inspired and you're very inspiring when you speak. So it's lovely to hear you. I was going to say it's exactly the same thing in relating to our own mind. It's the same process as well. This process of being able to drop into a very broad, open space and welcome everything that's arising within our own mind, and to allow that meeting to create a new perspective. It's the birthright of inspiration, creativity.
Yeah.
What you're describing about is we can explore, allow it and recognize it on the mat. We can allow it into a dialogue, and we can also just allow it within ourselves. And it's always that something has to drop for something else to have the space to unfold. And what comes with realization is a sense of awe and a recognition of something which is primarily perfect, actually.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for sharing. Very, very beautiful.
That's just sometimes this magic happens, but this doesn't belong to anyone. It's just something that happens between us in that space, and when that happens, the time kind of, there's no time. It's just something that occurs there, and each one brings his own something from himself or herself, but it's actually something new and very beautiful.
A way to speak about it is like two waves meet, and they spend some time together, and then after a while, because they're not so interested in their shape, in their height, in their speed, after a while, the ocean recognizes itself in both of them.
Wow.
That we space. It's a recognition. It's a shift, and that's why it's so grand and so mysterious. And we cannot do it. The waves can't do the ocean. They already are the ocean, but they can meet, and in their meeting, they can be a doorway so that suddenly the ocean recognizes itself. And actually, that's how we speak of love. Love is God meeting with itself, or peace recognizing itself. And so yeah, it can use many different waves. I mean, they're all good for that, for that matter. So great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, Dominique, let's see. So we have about, it's 50 minutes in. Can I read one more question from Amber? How are you doing with time? I want to respect your time.
Yeah, just one last question, maybe.
Okay, great. All right, so this is a question from Amber. She says, lately it seems to me that everything is a story/movie. Everything is a limited experience, and I am a limited experience. It's frustrating, and even that feeling of frustration is compounded by an understanding that it's just one more thing flitting, that means momentarily, appearing across the movie screen. This feels uncomfortable. Shall I stay with this feeling? It's so bleh, it's so unpleasant.
So we'll switch metaphor if she's using the one of the movie and the screen. So basically, no, it's a very, very good place to be in. Now it's a transition place, but it's a good, don't run away from it, because basically, if we take the metaphor of the movie and the screen, and we have this character, and this character wants to find the screen. The character is suffering, and it's realizing, okay, there's no way I want to continue like that. And he hears about this amazing thing, which is called the screen, in which there's no suffering and there is abiding peace. So the character starts to look around for the screen. So one of the first things that the character needs to do to see the screen is to become very much disinterested with the movie. So we're absolutely fascinated by the movie, what's happening to me, to the other, to the world. We're like, I mean, completely, fascinated by the movie. And so fascinated by it that that's why we never see the screen, actually. So a very first good step is to realize, oh, it's all a movie. Actually, it's all those very small, limited character moving together, and it's flat, and there's no perspective there. And so it seems that might be where you're at right now. You're starting to look at your habitual reality and to see it from a different perspective, where it's suddenly more flat, where it doesn't have the juice it used to have. So it's not like you have to stay there, but it means that you're actually starting to look in a different way. And right after that, then if that movie is all those little limited part between them, then start to become interested on where is it arising from, because those separation are arising somewhere. They're seen by something which cannot be limited, otherwise it wouldn't see the whole of it. And so it can allow into a much, much deeper inquiry and experience in your meditation. So I would love to work one-on-one with you for something like that, actually. But so no, I don't think it's anything bad. It's a bad place at all. I think it's really because you're starting to question the way you were perceiving reality. And there is a moment where it just feels like, oh, it's just a movie. But it doesn't mean that there's anything, that it's not beautiful. I mean, the fact that there's this moment now that we're speaking together, that there is all those forms and sound and color and creativity and words. And I mean, the whole of reality is just a magnificent dance, but yes, it's only the movie. All the waves are absolutely stunning. And yes, they're just waves, they're not the ocean. I mean, there is the depth of the ocean, which is incredible to see. So right now you're the wave and you're looking at all the other waves and you're saying, that's not the ocean. And you're right. And that actually it is the ocean too, but yes, you're right. It's just those little waves. So we'll start to look deeper then.
And in terms of her feeling frustrated or unsatisfied with this, as you called, transition, any recommend or any advice?
The frustration with the movie, or the frustration?
Well, as she said that she's seeing that it's all this kind of movie, and that it's let me just go back to her question. She says it feels uncomfortable. This feels uncomfortable. Shall I just stay with this feeling? It's so bleh. It's so unpleasant.
So a feeling is just another movement into the movie. And like every movement into the movie, you can welcome it and allow it to be there. And dissolve is just one more waves. It's in no way limiting anything, actually. And so I wouldn't be worried about frustration. Actually, frustration is really important on the path, because it's also what keeps us looking and exploring. So you can actually even welcome the frustration. And it can be a divine frustration. It's the frustration of the character or the wave saying, where is the damn ocean? I really don't like all those waves anymore. I want something else. Very good frustration. You want the wave to be frustrated like that. and not to worry about it. Allow the frustration, see the frustration like an uke. So can the frustration be an energy that allows you to evolve, that gives you energy to ask questions, to go deeper in your practice, and to start looking, basically become less interested with the movie. You're saying it doesn't have the reality you thought it had. You're saying that. So start to look at what sees the movie. Where is the movie arising in? What is it made of? What's the eye watching the movie? Is the eye watching the movie separately from the movie? You can start to really have beautiful exploration there. So the stage of realizing the falsity of the movie is absolutely essential. And the frustration is good. Welcome it.
Well, Dominique, that's it for the questions. There were a few more, but we'll go ahead. I think we covered quite a bit today. I just want to thank you very much for not only for your time, but for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your understanding.
Well, it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to share at that level. So I'm really thrilled. It was really lovely.
That's great. Well, so speaking of opportunities, I do want to mention to everybody that's on the call that Dominique is beginning to lead She's going to lead monthly meditations via Zoom. And the time is, it's going to be on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Central European time. Is that right? Yeah. So unfortunately, for those in North America, it's not the best. It's kind of the middle of the night. But for those over across the pond, this side of the pond, it works. But these sessions, I guess, will be recorded and posted somewhere afterwards.
That's,
perhaps. I'm going to help you. If you want to, I will help you do that. And anyways, nonetheless, I'm going to, if you're here today, or if you're seeing this recording, I will send out an email tomorrow with information for basically to everybody about Dominique's meditation. So because I think that Dominique's a treasure, and I would love to share her gift and what she's sharing with everybody to our community as well. So thank you, Dominique.
Support mine. It's
yeah.
Okay.
Very welcome.
Lovely time. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Anybody else? You have final comments for Dominique or anything before we all your mics are open.
I just honor your wisdom. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, wisdom is the ocean meeting itself in two ways too. So it's co-created.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you, Ellie. Hey, Carl, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Are you okay with the fires over there in California?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Well, they're not right next to me.
Yeah.
They're a little bit south, and it's been very smoky at times. And now it's really windy, so I'm really afraid for those firefighters.
They're moving,
like some of those fires are only 2% contained. And here it is, God's blowing all this big air at them.
Yeah.
So I hope they do well.
Yeah, we wish you and everybody in that part of the world safe passage.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Dominique, any final words before we say goodbye?
No, I'm all talked up for tonight.
All right. Okay, so thank you so very much, and if you can stay on the line for just a second, we can talk for a second, okay? And everybody else, thank you for joining, and our next session will be on Sunday with me. You'll get an email about that. You'll get an email about that within 24 hours. All right, everybody.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Dominique.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.